Today, we're talking about the most recent injury updates around the Washington Commanders. We're also going to be talking about adjustments that the Commanders must make moving forward this season. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that like, hit that subscribe, and follow the channel as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football daily. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. And let's start with the latest injury updates around the Washington Commanders. And so I got a chance to look at head coach Dan Quinn's presser here, and he's giving updates around these players. He also talks a little bit about the adjustments that the Commanders are looking to make. And so just paraphrasing this, and if you want to see the entire presser, you can head over to the Commanders YouTube page. And so starting with these injuries, we're going to go through them and then just reflect on them. And so the first injury update that we get is around Jayden Daniels. And so it looks like that Jayden Daniels does have a dislocated left elbow, and there is no timetable right now. And he said that they are still trying to gather the last little bit of information. Now, he is asked a little bit later in the press conference if it is a dislocation or a fracture. And he says that it is a dislocation and not a fracture, and that he will know something here come Wednesday or Thursday, but it is going to knock Jayden Daniels out for a while. The next, he gives us an update here around Marshon Lattimore. And so with Marshon Lattimore, it looks like that the MRI confirmed that he did in fact have an ACL injury, and he will be knocked out for the rest of the season. And so Marshon Lattimore out for the season. The next, Luke McCaffrey. And so Luke McCaffrey looks like that he broke his collarbone. And so they're still working through the timetable for that. And he said that he will be knocked out for a while as well. And then lastly, he gives us an injury update around Terry McLaurin. And so with Terry McLaurin, he does say that he is for sure out against the Detroit Lions. And so he's not going to be out there this upcoming week. And he did mention that, they're thinking about the fact that the Commanders have a game here against the Lions. They have a game against the Dolphins, and then they have that bye week with Terry McLaurin. And so, those are the most recent injury updates here around the Washington Commanders. And now, just kind of reflecting on this and really what this means. And so first, it just really sucks. Like, it sucks that, all these players are injured. They're definitely players that certainly impact the Washington Commanders in a big way. In fact, that is something that Dan Quinn talks about, just how these players go out and compete and how they fit the Commanders style and everything else. And so it's a huge loss to the team. And so, starting with Terry McLaurin, like I've been saying, like over the last couple of videos, that if Terry McLaurin has gone back to where he was when he initially injured the quad, it's going to be some time to get him back again. And so, I could see a situation where Terry McLaurin is out, till the bye week or maybe a little bit longer than that. And so let's see what happens with this situation. Obviously, I'm hoping that he can get back sooner, rather than later. But I think the bottom line here for all these injuries is that the Commanders really have to play the long game. I don't think that you necessarily want to play the short game with any of these injuries. And so that's my thoughts here with Terry McLaurin, is that you don't want to rush him back, just like you don't want to rush any of these other players back. And so I would rather that they go ahead and take their time and get him right. And so that means if they do have to shut him down, fine. I just want to see Terry McLaurin and these players get back at full strength. And so next, just kind of going back to the situation with Luke McCaffrey. And so, with Luke McCaffrey, I felt like this is a player that really just came on this season. I felt like that he for sure needed some more opportunities at the wide receiver position. I think he's doing a terrific job in special teams and things like that. You can definitely tell he's taken a step forward from year one. And with Terry McLaurin, set to be out some more weeks, I think that Luke McCaffrey was that player that you could go ahead and say, okay, maybe now you put him into situations to see if he can step up some more. But unfortunately, right now, we're not going to find that out because he has the broken collarbone. And so, again, just like all these other players, it just absolutely sucks to see him down. And then next, with Marshon Lattimore, like with that situation, I mean, the Commanders haven't even got a full season with Marshon Lattimore. And so it just absolutely is horrible that you haven't even seen a full season with him. And I think that it was great that you saw something just good from him against the Kansas City Chiefs, able to get that interception and everything else. And so Marshon Lattimore competes his tail off, and it's unfortunate that his season's going to end with the knee injury. And then lastly, with Jayden Daniels, look, it's your franchise quarterback. And just like I would say around all these players, or like I've already said, actually, is that you just don't need to rush him back. And so even if he is good to go later on this season, I think that the Commanders really need to think about, is it really worth playing Jayden Daniels the rest of the season? And so we'll see what happens. There's still a lot of season left. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but I do think that that is something that the Commanders are going to have to really think about, with these players that could still possibly come back from these injuries. And so unfortunate right now, but the Commanders have been hit hard with injuries this season. And so next, I wanted to talk a little bit here about the adjustments. And so some of the other things that Dan Quinn does talk about in his presser is that the Commanders are going to be making some adjustments. And so one of the things that he says is that Coach Joe Wood Jr. will be coming down to the field, and he'll be, going ahead and calling defenses that way. He felt like that's the best way to kind of get out there and maybe communicate, and then also to correct things on the field. He talked about how he's a great communicator and everything else. And so that is one of the adjustments that the Commanders are going to make, is that Joe Wood Jr. is going to be coming down from the box now, and he's going to be on the field, I guess making calls and things like that. And then the next thing that he talked about in his presser is just that the team is just going to continue to dig in and just find ways to just make the changes to get to that spot. And so I'm just guessing that he's talking about just maximizing, the team performances and things like that. And so making those adjustments, he did also mention in his presser too about getting to the quarterback and being disruptive. So that's something that the Commanders certainly want to do. And so now, just kind of extending, just on kind of what Dan Quinn talked about with some of these adjustments, and just thinking about what this means on both sides of the ball. First and foremost, it's not just the defense that's going to have to make some adjustments. I mean, yes, there's situations throughout this season. You can look at the defense and say, okay, the tackling needs to be better. Yes, they need to get some pressure. Yes, they need to take away the big plays. And, penalties, I think, have been across the board for all the football team, but it's not just them. And it's now you have to figure out a way to adjust now with the injuries and everything else in the secondary and up front. And so that's certainly going to impact, just how you probably call the football game and stuff like that. And then also, too, I think, the bottom line across the board for the team is just they're going to have to try to figure out ways to really not beat themselves. Like, I get it, if other football teams kind of come in and, they beat the Commanders, I get all that, but you don't want to be looking back at the game film and stuff like that and say, okay, look, we beat ourselves. And I think that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing can be for sure cleaned up. And so hopefully the Commanders can make these adjustments, starting there on defense, just with personnel and stuff like that, and figuring out, okay, what's going to be, the best case scenario here to make this defense successful down the stretch of the season. And then with the offense, look, I think that the same thing is there for them. Like, I think that they're going to have to really look at the personnel and make some adjustments there, because Terry McLaurin is gone. Noah Brown is gone. Now Luke McCaffrey is going to be out for some time as well. And so that means that Cliff Kingsbury is going to have to make some adjustments now, that if Marcus, Mariota is going to be your guy, you're going to have to figure out ways to put him into spots to where he can be successful as a quarterback. That means, too, that when you're looking at these wide receivers, you might have to throw Traylon Burks out there and see what you have with him. Maybe this is a situation where you do see some more of a Chris Moore. Maybe it is you have to, draw up some more stuff to try to get Debo and these guys open. And so those adjustments are going to happen as well when you're talking about the personnel. And then, just looking at the running game too, the Commanders, yes, they've done a great job as far as running the football and everything else, but maybe this is a time where you have to lean in a little bit more on a Jeremy McNichols or a Chris Rodriguez Jr. Like, I just think that the Commanders are going to have to mix this stuff up some more. And then lastly, just across the board with this team, just more discipline. So one of the things that I talked about in the post game was yet again, the penalties. look, those things stacked up yesterday. It's something that I think has just really stacked up as this season has gone along. The Commanders haven't figured out a way to stop beating themselves there. And so they're going to have to become a bit more disciplined down the stretch. And I will say this with the Commanders, like everything is still in front of them. And so I know, it's tough right now as a fan just looking at this. But, as of right now, at the time of this recording, the Dallas Cowboys just lost to the Arizona Cardinals here. And so you see that they're 3-5-1. The Commanders are 3-6. And yes, the Eagles are 6-2, but you're very much still in this thing if you can just put together some good football down the stretch here. And so, injuries and stuff like that can hit anybody in the NFL. But I think that really what the Commanders can do now is just try to figure out a way to just get consistent and see where it takes them from there. But the season, you still have a lot left, but you've got to figure something out like right now. So anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking as far as just, some of these adjustments and things like that moving forward for the Washington Commanders, as they're just going to have to figure some things out here with these injuries and things like that. Then also let me know what you guys are thinking here with these injury updates around, Jayden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Luke McCaffrey, Marshon, Lattimore, and would you want to see these players continue on this season if they are able to come back? Like, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are there as well. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, look, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.